Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 12 of Miller Live. I appreciate chiming in here to get her live, and it's good to be back in the United States after a great trip to Brazil. In tonight's A block, the buried lead in this week's January 6th committee drama. This past week has been a swirl of headlines surrounding the January 6th attack on the Capitol. We've had Bill Barr attacking President Trump. We've had selective edits, which we'll get to more in a minute. And we've had the committee doing every possible thing they could do to turn MAGA world teammates against each other, and even, though not very believably, against President Trump. But it's critical here that we separate the signal from the noise, as Steve Bannon would say, and focus on the only thing that matters. The committee doesn't have anything. Hundreds of interviews, thousands of hours, millions of dollars, all wasted. Yet when asked if the J6 committee was planning on referring a matter about President Trump to the DOJ, Democratic Committee Chair Benny Thompson said the sole aim of the committee's investigation is to, quote, tell the facts, not solicit criminal prosecutions. And he continued by saying, quote, if the Justice Department looks at it and assume that there's something that needs further review, I'm sure they'll do it. Folks, this is a bombshell. The very chairman of the J6 committee just admitted that there's no there there. There never was. But don't let that get in the way of Democrats and the media colluding to attack President Trump and MAGA Nation. Now, this set off an immediate firestorm within the committee, with Liz Cheney arguing the exact opposite, that a decision will be announced at a different time, and with Adam Schiff saying there hasn't been a discussion on this yet, to which I'd simply throw the challenge flag and say, bullshit. Of course they've talked about it. Only Benny Thompson is the only committee member with the courage to answer honestly. I want to take this a step further. Right now, there's a discussion of 3 active grand juries dealing with January 6th that are publicly known. Number 1, a grand jury focusing on the violence that happened on January 6th. Number 2, a contempt of Congress charge against Peter Navarro. And 3, the entire nonsense about boxes being inappropriately removed from the White House. That's not going to go anywhere. That's just a complete witch hunt, as we've seen from this DOJ before. But there's no grand jury going after President Trump. The DOJ knows that President Trump isn't going to be charged with anything. Benny Thompson knows that President Trump isn't going to be charged with anything. And Liz Cheney knows that President Trump isn't going to be charged with anything. But she's mad that she's losing her primary in Wyoming by 28 points to a Trump-endorsed candidate, and she's trying to get her political revenge. So, typical Washington garbage. This is why people hate the swamp, the status quo, and everything else about politics. Another reason why people hate the swamp, and most all politicians, because they're dishonest. Last Thursday, the J6 committee used a selective edit from my committee deposition in their televised hearing. In it, I was asked about a meeting in the Oval Office on November 6th, a day before the race was called, and before any legal challenges had even been filed. The campaign's data expert, Matt Oskowski, and I use expert with air quotes around it, told President Trump it was his opinion that he would lose the race. Cheney and the Democrats then used that clip of me answering what was said to President Trump when I was in the room to make it appear as though I was the one who said it. Not the case. But Cheney and the rest of the committee failed to play the next answer in my deposition. When asked what President Trump's reaction to Matt Oskowski was, I replied, quote, I think it's safe to say he disagreed with Matt's analysis. Continuing, and I quote, he believed that Matt was not looking at the prospect of legal challenges going our way, and that Matt was looking at things purely from what those numbers were showing, as opposed to broader things to include legality and election integrity issues, which, as a data guy, he may not have been monitoring. End quote. So why didn't the J6 committee play this next answer in their hearing? Simply because it didn't fit their narrative, because they're not trustworthy, and because they're obsessed with attacking President Trump and turning his allies against each other, even if that means selective edits and quotes taken out of context. So one of the other things I've seen from the media is, well, how do we know that this transcript is legit? How do we know that you say it? Because, guys, the J6 committee has already used this transcript and they're filing against John Eastman. It's out in the public. You could simply Google search it. But too many in the media are lazy to do it, and Liz Cheney and the Democrats know that the media is not going to take that one extra step or do any of the work. Now, there is something I want to take very much head on. I've been asked by many of you why I even participated in the J6 committee deposition, considering that I feel the entire committee is illegitimate. Simple. My lawyers believe that since I worked on the campaign and not in the White House, I would need millions of dollars to legally challenge the subpoena by arguing executive privilege, and even then, I might not be successful. In addition to millions of dollars I don't have, it would have consumed my life, and it would have made it impossible for me to run Getter. Most important, though, it would have put my wife and young children through hell. They've already had people coming up to us and screaming in public, being uninvited to play dates, being attacked online, all because we're Trump supporters. Adding in millions of dollars spent and the potential dismantling of my ability to do my job and to provide for my family simply wasn't fair to them or to Getter. The point here is the goal of the January 6th committee is to ruin people's lives, and they know that, to take away their livelihoods, and even to take away their liberty. President Trump wrote earlier this week that we have a White House in shambles, with Democrats declaring that Joe Biden is unfit to run for re-election. And what is the Democrat Congress focused on? A kangaroo court, hoping to distract the American people from the great pain they are experiencing. 17 months after the events of January 6th, Democrats are unable to offer solutions. And I think most Americans would agree with what President Trump wrote. Barry Moore ripped the J6 committee last week in his American Greatness article titled "The J6 Pilot Flopped," writing, "The ratings don't lie. America is not enthralled. Despite unprecedented coordination on behalf of the mainstream media to synchronize coverage of the Democrats' mockumentary, the left-wing smokescreen failed to capture the hearts and minds of the nation. America does not want to, quote, J6 and chill," which I thought was pretty funny. And he continued that CBS's own Let's Make a Deal and The Price is Right drew more heated, perhaps because they delivered more than expected. A far better use of the committee's time, rather than attacking President Trump purely out of political spite, would have been to investigate why Nancy Pelosi and Muriel Bowser never took up President Trump on his offer to bring in 20,000 National Guardsmen on January 6th. Certainly Americans deserve to know if this all could have been avoided, or what the real circumstances are surrounding Ray Epps, or if there were any FBI informants that were part of the attack on the Capitol, and any point did these informants lead any efforts that ultimately created crimes or assaulted law enforcement officers. I'd like to know who killed Ashley Babbitt, or even ask what the real cause of the riots from the summer of 2020 were. But none of these answers will damage President Trump, his allies, or even his voters, which is the only thing the January 6th committee wants to do. This, my friends, is why people hate politicians. The January 6th committee is hell-bent on preventing President Trump from running for office in 2024. They are hell-bent in ruining the lives of anyone who's ever worked with President Trump on either of his elections. They are hell-bent on trying to demonize, castigate, and shun anyone who's ever identified as a Trump supporter. That is what this is all about. And it's why Democrats are going to lose the House and the Senate this fall.